We are in Washington, D.C., covering the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Interviews today right here in the offices of Senator John McCain. Welcome to the Mike Broomhead Show.
Well, I got a message, I got a song. Can I get a witness? Tell me what's going on. I show the people I've been away.
We filmed the opening to this show on Thursday in Washington, D.C., as you heard, in John McCain's office. Took a flight home this morning. It is Saturday morning. We are filming this now. We just got off the airplane, so I apologize for how tired we look, but I wouldn't miss this for the world. We start every show out with something we call the sweep. It's sponsored by our good friends at Zero Res Carpet and Tile Cleaning. Of course, everything in the sweep today is going to be about the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. And the ceremony of everything that happened there, it was just such an incredible time to be there. It was everything that's great about America, no matter where you stand politically, the peaceful transfer of power, to see all, 5 of the 6 living presidents on that stage together, Donald Trump making number 6. The only one not there was George H.W. Bush, and he even sent a very nice letter saying his health precluded him from being there, wishing Donald Trump well as President of the United States. It really was an amazing time to be an American, and for us, we were right on the National Mall, about a half a mile back from the Capitol building, with the Washington Monument behind us. I had a picture-perfect view of the day. It was really a sight to behold. Let's talk about Donald Trump's speech. Donald Trump, in his speech, talked about, first of all, thanking the Obamas and thanking them for their generosity and their grace. Watch this.
And we are grateful to President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama for their gracious aid throughout this transition.
Now, I've said before that what happens in something like this is President Obama made reference to this 3 or 4 times during the transition. The Bush team was so gracious to the Obama team. Big political differences between the Bush family and the Obama family. But he made sure that the incoming president had everything he needed. You learn that over 8 years in a job like that. President Obama seemed to be humbled by the 8 years, to the extent that he realized the extremes that George Bush went to, and he made sure his team did the exact same thing. Knowing that Donald Trump is about to go on a journey that, as much as he thinks he's ready for, is going to be a very difficult journey. Whether it's 4 or 8 years, it is a very difficult job. So he started off by thanking the Obamas. He went on in the speech to talk about what's happening in America and what's happening next. This is what he said about the future and what he plans to do.
We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people. Together, we will determine the course of America and the world for many, many years to come. We will face challenges. We will confront hardships, but we will get the job done.
And what was interesting in the speech, you got to remember now who's sitting with him. The Clintons are on the stage, the Obamas are on the stage, even the Bush family is there. And he talks about power in Washington and what is going to happen to the power. And this is one of my favorite parts of the speech, because this is what I believe the sentiment that got him elected. Watch this.
Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
That was one of the biggest rounds of applause he received. Now, it wasn't all roses. There were protesters that were there that were burning cars. It was ridiculous. But the Women's March happens today. There's women's marches going on all over Phoenix, other cities in the country, and it went on, a couple 100,000 women marching against the Trump policies and agenda. So it wasn't all roses. That's just how politics in America works. That's how it's supposed to work. Coming up in a few moments, a 2-part interview with me and Senator John McCain. Sitting in his office was just a fantastic time. So Stick around, you're going to love that. We'll get to that in a few moments. But before we go there, let me talk to you about the people at Zero Res. I talk about the product because it's called Empowered Water. It really is the best way to clean carpets. It's the only way you should. No soaps, no chemicals, just water, safe enough to drink, but cleans as effectively as cleaners. I'm not joking. You have kids, you have people that walk around on the carpets. You don't want that any chemicals near any of that if you can help it, and Zero Res solves that problem. $119. They will Zero Resify 3 rooms of carpet in your home, but you've got to get on it now. Get on their schedule. Always honored to have a guest on our show, except this time we're invading his space. We are in the office of Senator John McCain. Senator, thanks for being on the show again.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be with you, and thanks for coming back to help us try to do the Lord's work in the city of Satan.
Oh, yeah. If you need someone in Satan City, I'm your guy, I guess. Big difference. I've been here for a couple of days. What a difference this afternoon with security here in town.
Well, I think this is more security than I've ever seen, and obviously the attacks that have taken place in other countries in San Bernardino and Orlando have had an effect that we're literally shutting down this city. And it's just unfortunate because I can remember the first inauguration I attended was Ronald Reagan's second. The town was wide open. There was nothing shut down. People walked everywhere. They walked through the halls of Congress. They walked everywhere, and they could ride everywhere. And now it's really a city in lockdown.
Well, when you see the attacks in Europe, in Germany with the truck that was driven into the market, and in Paris, and so there's got to be a concern with that same kind of vehicular attack. So they pushed the perimeter out so far. On one hand, you can't blame them for the security, but it's got to be frustrating for someone that works, or at least tries to work here.
Yeah, and it's frustrating for the hundreds of thousands of people who come to Washington. It's their house here. It's not mine. It's their capital. And their ability to see and enjoy Washington, D.C. is curtailed and in many ways non-existent.
I talked with Representative Biggs this morning from Arizona. It's his first inauguration being right there. This is not your first. So what is it, does it ever get old? I mean, does it ever get mundane for you, or do you still get the same kind of enthusiasm of watching the transfer of power?
There's nothing like it, but this brings us to the point that now has never happened before, and that is large numbers of members of Congress are boycotting. It's sour grapes, they're sore losers, but more importantly, when we make a transition from one president to another, it shows the world that most important democracy, we have a peaceful transfer of power. And that sets an example to all these other nations. So now we have 60 or whatever it is, elected members of Congress who refuse to be here for this traditional transfer of power. I think it's very, very wrong, and in addition to that, I think part of it has to do with so many of them come from absolutely safe lifetime districts, which is a result of gerrymandering, putting them into heavily Democrat districts where they have really no challenge.
Do you think, first of all, how will they fill those seats? Do you have any idea who will fill? Because they're not going to leave those seats empty.
I think they're just going to remove the seats, to tell you the truth. I think they would just
squeeze the rows down?
I would imagine.
To me, what a shame that would be. I didn't agree with President Obama's policies on any level, but if I had been asked to be at the inauguration, I would have been at every single one of them. I was honored to be at the State of the Union address and to see him deliver the State of the Union address. I was 10 seats from the First Lady. What an experience to be in that room and watch how the Senate is brought in and the Supreme Court is brought in and the tradition of our country. How do you ever pass up that kind of an experience?
I don't know, Mike, but I remember, as you can imagine, extremely well 2009.
Yeah.
And I was eager to participate, to be a witness to, frankly, the first African American to be President of the United States, a message that sent around the world about our democracy, even though I happen to be the loser.
I was going to say, for you, that would have been.
So I had very mixed emotions. But the prospect of not attending, that would not have crossed my mind. That would have made me the ultimate sore loser.
How How do you maintain your sense of humor with some of those things? Because that was that had to be a difficult time for you to lose that election. But then the joke that I heard you tell when someone asked you how you slept.
Slept like a baby. Wake 2 hours, sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. I think the key to it is, I really do, is move on. I was so fortunate to still be a United States Senator and representing the state I love, and put it behind me. And the worst thing you can do, and you've experienced this in life when you lose a game or you lose a match or you lose a contract, is to look back and say, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. That's not, you didn't, and you lost. So you gotta move on. I probably shouldn't mention this, but I spoke to Hillary Clinton recently. I had known her when in the Senate, and obviously I didn't want her to be president, and I told her, I said, you just got to move on, find something to do. I threw myself back into the work of the Senate, which by the way was my obligation. So it's tough, but if you dwell on it, then it's non-productive. And if you do the worst thing, which is feel sorry for yourself, then it becomes a bit debilitating.
I'd like to talk about the work of the Senate, if you don't mind, because there's a lot going to happen in the next 100 days that the president-elect has promised, and I want to talk about working with him in defense and Obamacare. So take a quick pause. What we'll do is take a quick break, and we'll come back with segment 2 with Senator McCain. We're back talking with Senator John McCain in his office here in Washington, D.C., and one of the things that we had discussed earlier this week is working with the president-elect. I mean, obviously there was a bit of contention that happened. He said some things that you didn't agree with about other people. I had Megan on my show, your daughter, and we talked about it, and she said, she was right on the money. She said that you were going to be a lot more willing to work with the president-elect, but as the daughter of, when he made some comments about your time as a POW, it was a little bit more difficult for her to forgive. I've never got that impression from you, that from day one you have said to me that you want to work with this president. What does that mean? What's got to happen for this president to be successful and for America to be successful?
Well, let me tell you what it means to start with. We will be confirming General Mattis on Inauguration Day. That's the earliest we can do it. We moved his nomination rapidly through the Senate Armed Services Committee, of which I am chairman, as you know. We are moving General Kelly, the new Homeland Security guy. I had a hand in moving him as quickly as possible, and we will move his nominees so that they can go to work. That's the first thing I can do for the President of the United States. And by the way, it's not a favor, it's something that I need to do for the good of the country. And then we'll be talking about the defense authorization and funding for our military. I'm happy to note that the President-elect has said we need to spend more money on defense and we need to rebuild our military. And that is really important. We have cut spending on defense by 21% in the last 8 years. Do you think the world has gotten 21% safer? Of course not. But then there are issues that, frankly, especially our relations with Russia, that I cannot support a lifting of sanctions unless Vladimir Putin vacates the Ukraine. He's invaded Ukraine. He's killed 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers, not to mention things like using Russian aircraft with precision weapons to strike hospitals in Aleppo and kill sick and injured and wounded people. That has to stop. Now, we can have conversations with Vladimir Putin. That's fine. Just like Reagan used to have conversations with Brezhnev and Gorbachev. But lift sanctions without them repairing the damage, I just can't agree with the president.
Tell me if I'm wrong in this assumption. Vladimir Putin was KGB. He saw the mistakes of the Soviet Union, where it was their economy crippling that won the Cold War for the U.S. It was an economic disadvantage. Do you think he's learned that lesson and is trying to build the economy of Russia to then compete as a superpower? Is that his goal, is to rebuild the Soviet Union?
First of all, I think one of the major factors in the fall of the Soviet Union were our strength, President Reagan, peace through strength,
right.
And second was our message. After the Berlin Wall came down, there were thousands and thousands of people who said, I listened to Radio Free Europe. I listened to the Voice of America. I held on to my hope that someday we would be free from the communist rule from the Soviet Union. Our moral leadership, epitomized by Ronald Reagan standing at the Berlin Wall and saying, take down this wall. So there's a moral dimension. This is why I have questions about Mr. Tillerson. So we need to rebuild our military. I'm glad that the President of the United States has committed to that. But we also have to send this message about freedom, democracy, human rights. I don't want to give all history lessons to you, but one of the things that was passed by Congress during Richard Nixon's time was a thing called the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. It said that Jews who wanted to leave Russia, the Soviet Union, should be allowed to do so. That had a great impact on the whole breakup of the then Soviet Union. So there's the military dimension, and then there's the moral dimension. The 20th century was the American century. Why? Because of our leadership and our respect for human rights and our belief that all of us are created equal with certain inalienable rights. That's what America is supposed to be all about, and I'm not sure that this incoming president quite gets that.
So what then can you do with your influence in the Senate? What can you do to show that? 'Cause you say it so eloquently. What is it that gets the administration to listen?
Well, we have our responsibilities of authorizing literally everything in the armed forces. We have our responsibilities for funding, and we are basically co-equal branches of government. We also have control over whether his nominees for positions take those positions or not. By the way, that has to be handled very carefully because incoming presidents deserve the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of things that we can do. One of the things that we want to do right now that Senator Lindsey Graham and I are pushing hard, additional sanctions against Russia because of what they tried to do to this last election. I believe we can get a majority of the United States Senate and House to pass additional sanctions on Russia. Now, the President of the United States may not want to do that, and maybe he might veto. But that can cause a lot of issues to arise between us. And the Constitution says we are co-equal branches of government. I respect the Constitution, especially since I'm not the president.
Yeah, and that's right. So we're looking forward tomorrow to watching the inauguration, and I know that you're also going to be there. And I hope that when these first 100 days and when you're back in Arizona, we can look back at how well everybody worked together and see if we've moved America back in the right direction.
I think we can. Two things have to happen. One, the president has to, I think, be more inclusive. And second of all, the Democrats have to get over it.
Right.
That they have to understand that whether they happen to like it or not, Donald Trump is president of the United States. And so they have to get over it.
Right.
And we have to find areas to work together. And the second thing is that the president-elect has to reach out to them too to some degree. Every president, Republican, Democrat, the guy that was most famous for that, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill.
Right.
They didn't agree on anything, but there were two old Irishmen that liked to have drinks together and tell tired Irish jokes. But when the time came to save Social Security, they were together. And that's what we need more of around here, Mike. And I'm afraid that some of the dimensions of the internet play against that kind of relationship, and I'm sorry, and that's probably the subject of a whole nother program.
Which I'd love to do. And so we're out of time, but I want to make note before we leave that unlike MSNBC, we don't have you outside. You're inside where it's nice and warm. Yeah, freezing. And that was a great quote, by the way.
Thanks.
We'll be back. Welcome back. It's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. We call it From Arizona for America. It's our way to congratulate and thank the fine Arizona men and women who have recently graduated from boot camp and are now serving in our country's military. So please join me in honoring Airman Lawrence Tinson from Post and Butte High School in Santan Valley, Airman First Class Derek Underwood from Fountain Hills High School in Fountain Hills, and Airman Trent Cusack from Rio Salado High School in Mesa. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, you can go to the Mike Broomhead page at aztv.com. We'll be back in a minute with Broomhead's Best and hashtag this, so don't go away. This is the part of the show we call Broomhead's Best.
I committed to President-elect Trump that my administration would ensure the smoothest possible transition, just as President Bush did for me. Because it's up to all of us to make sure our government can help us meet the many challenges we still face.
The peaceful transfer of power is Broomhead's Best this week. It has happened 58 times where we've had the inauguration of a president. It doesn't always go smoothly, but it's always dependable. We show the entire world how democracy is supposed to work. The people vote, and whether it's a party exchange or not, we transfer power. That's the way it always should be. I'll be back in just a couple of moments to close out the show. Don't go away. A very special thank you to Senator McCain and his staff for letting us do that interview with him on such a crazy week. Next week on the program, we talk about the Waste Management Phoenix Open with some people from the Thunderbirds. They've been putting this tournament on and raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and it is the most attended sporting event in the entire world, and it's all ours right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We'll talk about that with them next week. I can't wait to talk about what they do, what they're planning on doing, and the first responders. We'll talk about that. Have a great week. God bless.
Get more of Mike Broomhead on Facebook, Twitter, and of course weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 550 KFYI.